This is Wolf Spirit Radio.
Welcome, my brothers and sisters, again to NWO Race with Time with Crystal Clark, Mhairead, MacDonald, and of course James Horak. And you're live.
Thank you, Dave. I appreciate it. Well, first of all, I guess happy Valentine's Day to all of you lovebirds out there. I'm going to take advantage of the perks of having our own radio show by giving a shout out to my very best friend and my husband for 16 years. Today is our 16-year anniversary. Beautiful, beautiful, wonderful man. Just an extraordinary human being, and I'm very, very lucky. And I think it's important for people to know that, you know, the time that I take to do these shows or write articles or write books, I can't do without the support of my other half and our son. So any gratitude that you have for me belongs to them as well, because they're my support network and they go out of their way. They're very, very giving people. I miss a lot. I miss a lot of things to do this work. Not, you know, we say, well, we do it for free, but it's our families that also we miss out on. So, and I would say that, one of the important things, you know, about a family or a marriage, that what makes it work, aside from the obvious, you know, the love and respect, is honesty. Honesty is super important because betrayal can cause irreparable damage and leaves really, really horrible scars. And this is really what our brethren, you know, I call it, you know, my immediate family is Team Clark. And Team Clark does what they can to make sure that their mother and their wife has what she needs to do to help the extended family, which I refer to in my writing as Team Earth. And so they're behind me to help me do what I do. But for a family, whether we're talking about our immediate families or our larger extended family, betrayal is a very, very big issue. And our brethren, that our brothers and sisters that are just now waking up, are learning this. And I've talked about this before in radio interviews I've done in shows before we began our own radio show. And Mhairead coined this really wonderful term called cosmic Twinkies, which I really love. And they will tell you, oh, the awakening process is so beautiful and it's unicorns and glitter. No, it's not. It's a destructive process. It's a necessary destructive process because it's tearing down all of the lies and all of the things that we believed in that no longer serve us. And this can be a very, very difficult process because for many people, they're learning that they have been betrayed by ideologies that have become the backbone of their beliefs for most of their lives. And a lot of people have talked about this before, many people, that the awakening process is very similar to the grieving process, in that first there's denial, then there's depression, then there's hopefully acceptance and anger. At some point, anger gets involved. And if people can move past the depression phase into the acceptance phase, and even a precursor form of anger, if they can emerge from that and we can help them do that, they're going to find a whole new kind of anger that James has very rightfully referred to repeatedly as righteous anger. And this is the point where we get things done. But the reason it's so difficult, the betrayal, that every human being on this planet is learning that this is the reality of their situation. They have been betrayed repeatedly by people that they have trusted to do the right thing on their own behalves. It is very much like a grieving process, but once we get through it, then that's where the magic happens. But that's the point that we have to get to. That's really important. And even though Team Clark does what they can to support me so that I can support my extended family, we don't always get it right, but we keep trying, and that's the important thing. And when it comes to the betrayal, because I'm using the word betrayal in a very visceral way. It cuts deep, very deep, especially with what's going on now. And there's a very real point of guilt in that, where we ask ourselves, how did I not see this? Because so much of the betrayal that the human beings on this planet are waking up to is them having depended on people for information to keep themselves and their children and their families and their planet protected and healthy. And they have been lied to so badly that they have been participating in their own demise out of ignorance, and not just their own, but that of their children. People who understand what vaccines really do. How can you not feel guilty? Especially if you have an autistic child after you did it. There's a very real point of guilt, but we have to get past that, because the guilt is based on, how did I not know I was being betrayed? And this is something we have tried to explain repeatedly. It's that for at least 100 years, there has been a very concerted effort to make sure you wouldn't know. So the blame needs to shift to where it belongs. And that's not really yourself in that respect. Until, and I've talked about this in my writing, until you reach the age of accountability, which is when you know the truth and then don't do something about it, then you should feel guilty. But for most of us, that's not the case. And there is, his name is Alvin Toffler. I don't know anything about him, but I came across this beautiful quote from him years ago that is the banner on my Facebook page. And before I tell you the quote, let me just say this isn't an open, I'm not advocating everything the man has ever said and done, because I don't really know who he is. But I don't believe in reinventing the wheel when someone has stated something so eloquently and perfectly. There's no reason to change it. And this quote is, "The illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn." And this is where people are going to struggle, because the betrayal that they're going to feel, which will shift into, personal shame for not knowing better. All of these things, they really go together, and we're going to try to help people along so that they don't get stuck in the self-hate or self-loathing, because it's really not people's fault until they know the truth, and they don't know. We want to change that because, well, I personally do. I can't speak for the other two. I would assume so, but they can tell you themselves. I really believe that people would do the right thing if they knew what it was. So that's a big part of why we do these shows, is to give you back what so much time and money and effort has went into keeping from you. Some of this show, perhaps even a lot of this show, we're going to talk about mind control. Now, when we talk about mind control, for people just now, popping out of the box, the phony reality box, this word doesn't have any preconditions that they can really latch onto in a meaningful way. For them, mind control comes from the science fiction movies where there's a helmet on someone's head with electrodes and they're being forced to do something. It doesn't work like that. It's much more covert, which is why it's so effective. Mind control, as we've pointed out in other shows, includes what we refer to as social engineering and perception management. This is very, very subtle. But this type of mind control requires, as a precondition of its effectiveness, the suppression of factual knowledge. This means removing intellectual barriers to their intended changes. So they want to manage you. They want to handle you. They want you to believe certain things that will have you go in a certain direction that only benefits them, which means that any type of information that would go against what they want is being retracted and subtracted and repressed and suppressed so that you won't get your hands on it. That in itself is a form of mind control. This is a war on knowledge. This is where the war on knowledge starts. People have an agenda. It's an agenda that doesn't include you. You're not in the club. You're the one being managed and handled by their agenda. So the war on knowledge begins with retracting and pulling out everything out of the collective consciousness that would contradict what they're trying to get you to believe and understand. There is an excellent movie that I found a couple of weeks or so ago called Silence of the Labs, Labs. It's on my blog. You can also Google it on YouTube and find it. And this is scientists and archaeologists that are telling you how disgusted they are because they were uncovering things that deviate from the official narrative, and they were shut down. And this is the first time I've actually seen these people speak up about it. It was a documentary. It's excellent. And this goes back to the winners, meaning the elite, the people that are in control, that will do anything to maintain that control, write and rewrite history, which means they're also rewriting your reality. And they are rewriting it in a way that your thoughts will flow down the river that they have put in front of you, and anybody who tries to give you a boat or take you off of that river is punished for it, and this can't continue. Now, this is where anomalies come in, and people like James and I and others who are really kind of at this point the black sheep of the alternative media. This is why people don't understand the importance of what we're saying, because they are not familiar with the anomalies that deviate from the official narrative tree. Regardless of the branch, it doesn't matter if we're talking about archaeology, history, biology, geology, physics, astronomy, cosmology, it's all connected. And this is why they're hiding so many things from us. And James has said many times before, and he's right, that science stores anomaly and puts it on the shelf. Why? Our reality, for people who have tried to get outside of the reality box, have seen that the official narrative of reality that we're given is it's like Swiss cheese. It has more holes than Swiss cheese. And the anomalies are where the holes are. They have been removed, so there's this big hole there. And you know, cosmic Twinkies and all these other people try to fill it in with nonsense. It doesn't work. And so when people aren't familiar with the anomalies that exist but they are not privy to because it deviates from that official narrative, they can't understand why what we're saying is so important, because we are resolving those anomalies. But then how can you resolve something for a person when they don't know it needs to be resolved? So I'm hoping that some of what we have to say tonight will change that. And this is, again, where the deal is. This is the deal that we talked about. This is episode 8. In episode 6, we talked about the deal. People are being offered this deal. The mainstream media is, everything that goes into the mainstream media is being pushed down from a single source. And Conan O'Brien has posted these. He's so good about it. He posts these videos constantly, and he'll have 25, 30 different local newscasters in the United States saying the exact same thing. This isn't happenstance. This isn't an accident. And I especially liked the one where what they were all repeating during their newscasts was "Don't worry, be happy" on the same day that Obama gave his State of the Union address recently. So you have to look at those kinds of things. So where the anomalies are, and this is what we're trying to resolve, but it doesn't mean anything if people don't have the preconditions of what the anomalies already are. And those anomalies are put on those shelves. And these people are offered these deals to keep those anomalies on the shelves, because those anomalies are where the truth lies. So only when people have individual and personal knowledge of these anomalies can they begin to understand two very, very important things. And the first one is the all-around official narrative of our reality is false. It's completely false. And the moment a person recognizes this, they move to step 2, which is, well, what's the reason for it? Obviously, there is one, and this is the war on knowledge. And this moves them into the third phase, which is the who, why, what, when, where. Because when those questions are answered, that's where you find the truth. And this is one of the things that I know we all miss about Kevin Smith, because he used to say constantly, wherever there's a big black hole, that's where I go, because I know that's where the truth is. And he was right. He had it figured out, and that's why he was so effective. Before we get started, I'm going to have James discuss some anomalies first. But before we do that, I want to talk about compartmentalization. This is another big part of mind control, which is also social engineering and perception management. I talked about this a lot in my first book in terms of the 30,000-foot view. And I described it with an analogy of a person with a camera, that their awareness was this camera that was focused all the way in on a rose, and it was focused so far in on that one thing, you couldn't tell what it was. And then you pan the camera out a little bit and you see, oh, it's a flower. And then you pan the camera out and you see, oh, it's a flower growing on a bush with other flowers. And then you pan it out again and you see, oh, it's this bush growing in the yard of a home. And then you pan the camera out again and you see, what's a neighborhood, and everybody in the neighborhood is growing flowers. And you keep doing that and you keep doing that. And you begin to pull more and more of reality in so that you're not stuck focused on this one little teeny tiny thing. And that's really super important. So, because when we're just stuck on this one little tiny thing through compartmentalization, it's like blinders on a horse. And James said it so beautifully the other day in a private conversation, which is what I took a very long time to say with that story as the analogy. But when you're talking about systems, whether we're talking about archaeology, astrology, biology, all of these different life sciences and systems, if they aren't being studied together, they aren't working together. And if they aren't working together, they aren't working. And that is where anomaly comes in. And it's really super important to address. So if you wouldn't mind, James, really quick though, let me give an example. So now people know, okay, so the JFK story had holes in it. Okay, anomalies. Go through the anomalies, try to resolve them, you'll get to the truth. I think maybe 9/11 is a better example because the anomaly on 9/11 is Building 7. So our government did this big investigation, supposedly. They left out Building 7. That's the anomaly. If you want to know what happened, you have to include that. And when they don't, that's how you know they're lying. So, James, we've talked privately many times about all kinds of anomalies, and you've even talked about them during shows, but I just don't think people get why that's so important. So there are several anomalies that we have, especially with artifacts. So I don't know how you want to start out talking about it. I know you've talked about the papyrus. If you want to start there, that's fine with me.
We have in archaeology a very restrained discipline. Anybody that's worked in it and worked where there were digs in strategic places like Egypt or South America and the Yucatan in the Middle East comes across anomaly all the time. And, of course, they're not addressed. And the first thing they find out is, well, this is not significant. This is not in keeping with the historical record or the archaeological record or the geological record. And you understand after you've been involved in it, and I was involved in it in early ages as an excavation technician, that this is what you're going to have to bite down and even swallow if you're going to go on into this field of study as a profession. And you have to decide very early whether you can stomach it or not. And there are people that think that they can make a difference, and more power to them. But every time they've tried, they've come up against hurdles that are insurmountable because the secret keepers do not want you or anyone else to get near what these anomalies represent. They wouldn't be anomalies if they weren't distressing to the record, and I put that in quotation marks. These people want to put, in your view, to the exclusion of everything else. For instance, if you knew the truth about the Sphinx back 50 years ago, the reality would have kept you from buying into what Egyptology was painting as a chronology. It took a geologist to come along and see that the pattern of wear on the Sphinx at its base was not caused from sand, but water, which meant the Sphinx was so much older than the unity of the Upper and Lower Nile under a dynasty. And so it preceded the monument building of the Egyptians. So if the Egyptians didn't build it, then we move on to the Great Pyramid. If they didn't do it, as we are told, with quarrying stone and transporting it from the quarries and using levers and all these rollers, et cetera, to push these stones in place, and then we've never figured out, no one's ever given us a reason how they were so tightly put in place. And so we had to deal with the fact that these people must have had slaves. They must have had a slave caste. Their economy must have been built on a slave caste. And then we start falling in line with mythology, namely a Jewish mythology. And all of this isn't true.
It isn't true, and I definitely want to get into Zionism, but I want to do it a little bit farther down the road after we've made a few points, so it won't be so difficult for people to kind of really look at. I know that you've talked about it before. I don't remember where, but would you like to tell people how the pyramid was really built?
If you look at some of the stones, first of all, when people are talking about the capstone with respect to the Great Pyramid, they're not talking about the stone on top. There's supposed to be a crystal, it's supposed to be gold, whatever. There's no indication it ever was. But what the capstone was the entire pyramid was covered with a layer of limestone. And it would glisten in the sun. And some of the great Roman historians would talk about that in their writings. Plutarch did, Herodotus did, Plato did. It was a spectacle to see. But what we see today, there is some capstone still on the pyramid, but most of it was taken from the pyramid and used in building buildings in Cairo. What we see today is we still see these enormous stones that are put together very carefully. The Masonic ability of how these stones are put together and how that the pyramid is remaining level. And so many other characteristics go beyond the description we are told of how it was built. And if we express a knowledge that these people could read constellations, could read the seasons, could have a calendar, were capable of using sand for levers and movements of stone, do all these incredible things. And then we think, yeah, and they used people and broke their backs, slave labor, to transport these stones, et cetera, et cetera. It's a lot simpler that they built molds. They took sand and mixed it with a conglomerate in something in the way of a concretion and threw a few fossils in just for looks.
And that's, that's something that I don't know that we've talked about publicly quite enough, but there's a very real truth embedded in what you said in terms of when you're trying to resolve an anomaly, you go for the easy stuff first. So as an example, if your car won't start, you don't go out and buy a new transmission. You check the battery, you make sure you have gas, you make sure that your starter is working, and it's a process of elimination that goes from the simpler things to the more complex things. And this is something that we don't see anymore because science has been so corrupted. So they made molds. Is that so hard to believe? That's the smart way to do it, and it makes a lot more sense than rolling these huge stones on tree stumps in the mud. It makes more sense, and I think that's our goal, right? To re-inject some common sense. People have to deprogram from what they've been told and what's been repeated over and over and over again. It doesn't make any sense. But you've talked before, James, about a papyrus that deals with Moses, and if you wouldn't mind, I would like you to get into that. But please, I didn't mean to cut you off. Feel free to finish what you were saying.
The Exodus would have been, from what we know factually, the Exodus would have been contemporaneous with the dynasty and lineage of Tutankhamun. It would be in the history of the papyrus. It was in the tombs, and it was there because it was a sealed tomb. When Carter found it, it was a sealed tomb. and no grave robbers had ever touched it. So the papyrus would have been there, and the papyrus would have told what his ancestors in his particular dynastic lineage, how they conducted themselves, who they were, what actually happened. So this never came to light because it would have crushed the myth that the Hebrew nation has built its history on, and Moses. And of course, there are people that are in situations where they've had access to the information which is kept secret, like 33rd degree Masons. 33rd degree Masons pay a special homage to Akhenaten. Why do they pay a special homage to Akhenaten? Because he was Moses. And of course, that's a big secret, and they think that they draw some kind of refinement on keeping secret. They don't. The only time that secrets are kept to cover lies.
Yes, it's a betrayal to all of us.
It's a betrayal. It's a betrayal. Of course, I am not anti-Semitic. The Jewish people excel in many things, in many ways. They raise their children with very good ideals. They do what they can to educate them, take pride in being professional. But then there is another kind of people with an ethnicity all their own, and they are not Jewish in the way of what I'm describing. They're termed Ashkenazi. They're, for the most part, today Zionists, and then they are part and parcel of a banking conspiracy that's been going on ever since the defeat of Napoleon. These people have set their hat to take over the world through various means, all of them based upon placing nations in debt. And then by virtue of that, through world banks and through managing funds arbitrarily, like commodities, like stock market transactions and so forth, they can swing things. It's like a wheel of fortune that they control where it stops. And this is what has happened over and over again. They became so wealthy financing war, they became orchestrators of war. They became so wealthy, moving people's gold around, and so powerful that when they were held to account by Germany recently for its own gold that had been stored with the IMF, they were told no. There are so many things that people are ignorant of in the history of how it has all come to this, that they really don't know what you're talking about when you talk about the Gold Reclamation Act. They really don't know what you're talking about when you talk about the many people that were put in prison because they in some way enfranchised on this Gold Reclamation Act and the laws that came about due to it. Dentists, so many hundreds of dentists had criminal charges brought against them because they bought too much gold foil. And during Black Thursday, when the banks closed in 1934, at the same time the Gold Reclamation Act was passed secretly and people couldn't get to their banks over the weekend or that Friday, they come back Monday and all of their safe deposit boxes have been looted of most things of value, even beyond what's gold. And we're talking about minted U.S. gold coins, $20 gold pieces, whatever. They've never given back. And you've never been told about this. Rewriting history is part of the deception, and the deception is part of the mind control. They rewrite history all the time. They don't like other people that try to revisit history and check out if the facts of this rewritten history are true. Berkeley, which is supposed to be a very good school in California, Berkeley threw students out because they were challenging some of the facts, so-called facts, that the Holocaust were based on. And, of course, this is the white elephant in the room. We're supposed to believe that the Holocaust affected Jews, and not only Jews for the most part, and that there was 6 million of them that were killed. There weren't 6 million in Europe. So we go on and on and on into all this garbage, and it's all been useful for people that want to pull the wool over your eyes and then have everyone else trained that when you object, oh, you're being anti-Semitic.
Yeah, the peer pressure, the race card, always pulling the race card. I do want to go back, though, to the papyrus, James. How was it suppressed? I think this is an important part of the story.
I'll give you the story, and this comes from several books that I read on the subject. I kind of put it all together. Howard Carter found Tutkhamen's tomb on the day that he was beginning to clear out. And it was a kind of a freak accident. One of the workers found it. Once he realized what he had found, he had a bodyguard that carried a Thompson submachine gun all the time. His patron was Lord Cardigan, and Carter was not famed for his Egyptology expertise, but more for the fact that he was in line with the interests of his patron. So he immediately started patrolling that tomb and making sure nobody got there. It was sealed. This was never denied. Dr. Budge, who was the leading Egyptologist of the day, offered to translate the papyrus for Carter. Carter never responded. There was never any statement that it didn't exist. There's never any reason to believe it didn't exist. But it would have brought so much factual information and corrected so many myths that it was a real hot potato at the time, especially with the Egyptian government. And, of course, they influenced the Director of Antiquities in Cairo. During this time, within a few weeks that the discovery leaked out, reporters started converging on the site and all grouped together in Cairo and came out to the Valley of the Kings together. And when they got there, it was getting dark. Carter was still in the tomb with his bodyguard. And so one of the workers took them to Carter's tent where they could at least have light, and they were all thirsty. So they looked around and they saw a crate of wine, his wine crate, and they said, well, let's open that. So one of them went over and opened that up, and inside was a gold statue of Isis. And then they discovered an address on it was being sent to London to Lord Cardigan. So that got out to the Director of Antiquity, and the Director of Antiquity took Carter's permit away, which meant that would close down the operation and everything else from that point on. And so a few days later, one of those reporters is sitting in at the desk of the Director of Antiquities in Cairo, and Carter bursts in the door, threatening, how would you like it if Jews found out what's in that papyrus? And when he said that, the curator, or the Director of Antiquities, threw an inkwell, and these things were heavy, at Carter's head. But Carter got his permit back. Since then, no one has seen the papyrus. And it's been several times it's been brought up in conversation, and it's never resolved.
So just to be clear, because I don't want this open for interpretation for people who may not be with us all the way. Why was it suppressed? Who did it benefit?
Well, it displays for all the world to see that most of the Hebrew tradition is based on myth. You know, same is true with India. You can go to tombs in India and they'll tell you that represents 1,000 generations or whatever, and that's malarkey. And the Hebrews want to do pretty much the same thing. And, of course, it's mythology. What it does is it wrecks the mythology. Moses wasn't a Hebrew. Moses was a Pharaoh. Moses was Akhenaten. So, you know.
Okay, well, let's combine this with. Now, before I say this, I want people listening to know that I've seen this really beautiful quote on Facebook, and it's just so perfect. And it says, "Can we stop arguing over who created the world and start fighting against the people destroying it?" So you and I are in no way trying to lead people down some kind of weird road to nowhere. We want them to know what has been done to them so that they can seek justice for it and correct the problem. So let's piggyback what you just said with where the 10 Commandments really came from. Would you like to talk about that?
They came from the Code of Hammurabi, a Babylonian king. There have been other laws that were couched in much of the same language, but not expressly almost identical with the Ten Commandments, like the Code of Hammurabi. But you go back, you have laws. And, of course, these laws are set out to be applied to everyone equally due to the way things are corrupted by the kind of people that get hold of the instruments of governance. In the modern world of the media, this becomes more and more contorted until you have a class society instead of a classless society. We grew up, we were told that America was not a class society, that everybody was in the same class. Should have known that wasn't true to begin with. But today it's so evident, and not only that, you have people that refer to everyone else as useless eaters and that it should be removed from the face of the earth through depopulation, and publish books and work for think tanks and all saying this crap. And they have got more and more people buying into that. And you even have people that they would call useless eaters arguing for them. If that is an example of mind control succeeding, I don't know what would be. It's like one of the things I point to, which is an aberration again. Anytime you come across aberrant behavior, you have to ask, why is it there? Why is it passed on to children? If it's something that be passed on to children, then there's mind control involved. This goes beyond influencing opinions. This goes on beyond belief systems. This is damaging immediately. And it's fostered in such a way that it takes because it carves out its own comfort zone. So people cling to it.
It creates new monsters.
Yeah.
It creates, But before we go on, though, I want to go back to King Hammurabi, because you said that he was from Babylonia. That predates the Egyptian civilization. So by now, a lot of people in the alternative media have figured out that what is in so much of what's in the Christian doctrine is also in the Egyptian doctrine. But there's a much, much older source that neither of them are telling you about. Do I have that right?
Oh, yes. Through all of this, and right on up, it might even exist to some degree today, there was a group of people who, as late as Rome, were a very privileged group because they were learned. They were regarded highly for their ability to interpret dreams, heal, a number of other things. They had their own civilization at one time. It had reached a height. But they were completely unique in the world. During one era or another, they would adapt and they would exist within a society, but they would still keep to themselves very much like the Moors did in Spain.
Like I do today.
Yeah, like people that retain their integrity. And these were the Etruscans, of course. All the knowledge of what the Etruscans wrote and of what Etruscans taught and what many of the Romans knew about the Etruscans has been suppressed.
Who were the Etruscans, James? We have a lot of new listeners, and this is really so important. Who were they, and why is what they knew no longer shared?
They were an order that was created to protect the Hall of Records so that it could be passed on from the sixth extinction to the lineage we have today. And they developed a means and a way to do this and to survive within a particular context. And some of them may exist today. But over many years, they have been sort of passed over or disregarded or feared or whatever. The Romans spoke highly of them. They are mentioned by all the Roman historians with awe. The way that the knowledge of the Etruscans is suppressed is that we are told that their language has never been translated. But what they're doing, they're referring to the decorative designs that they would put on their armor or on their vessels or whatever, because they were very unique in that way. But their language is Latin. They gave Latin to the Romans. And you won't find a historian or archaeologist or anyone that will say what I just said, that wants to keep their tenure or wants to be able to survive in their profession. Because what I just said is biggest no-no, one of the biggest no-nos, because then people would ask, well, if that's true, then they must have scrolls or what? Yeah, they do. And all these scrolls have been taken.
Where are they?
There's some in the Vatican. There's some in Cambridge, in the Etruscan room at Cambridge, which the only person who can get in there is the director of antiquities or the head of the antiquities department or ancient languages, whatever they call it now. And he's got the key to the room, and he's the only one who can go in it. You know, when Robert Graves was trying to achieve the tenure or whatever so that he might get there, since he had published so much and written books like King Jesus and White Goddess and so forth, they weren't about to let him get there. So
yeah, he wasn't going to support their official narrative crap, was he?
Oh, no. He had blown the lid off of it. He wrote a lot of fiction, but it was all based on things like I'm talking about. I mean, he put the truth in it. The White Goddess is one of the most amazing books. He was a genius in ancient languages like Rex Warner and like T.S. Eliot. Not T.S. Eliot, but T.E. Lawrence.
And completely unlike Zecharia Sitchin, which we will get to. Yeah.
The phony, the absolute phony.
Yeah.
But these men were gifted. One thing that many of these people have in common in England is that when you're so gifted, you get, at a very early age, you get conscripted, so to speak, in MI5 or MI6.
Yeah, even now, that still happens. Yeah.
Whereas we here, we're not quite that picky about who we get in the CIA or in any other agency. But the English are very famous, kind of like the Jesuits. Most of these intelligence organizations are modeled after the Jesuits, by the way.
Before we go too much farther, James, I want to finish off with Moses. And so many of the things that we're talking about tonight are things that I've learned that are the reasons behind me having taken my first book off the market. I don't write. I'm not looking for a Pulitzer Prize. I'm not looking for a bestseller. I don't even want to be doing this. There are 1,000 different things I would rather be doing, but given our situation, how can I? So I don't, doing these shows, believe me, there are so many other things I would rather be doing. But this is where we're at, and we have to deal with it. So going back to what I wrote in the first book, there was one man I came across, and I talked to his widow on the phone. She wrote me letters. Wonderful woman. His name was Professor Edmund Bordeaux-Zeke. He was allowed into the Vatican's private vaults, which is very rare. But now I understand that the only people who are let into those vaults, who can talk about what they saw in those vaults, have to do it in a manner in which they don't rock the boat too much. And most of what he revealed was about the Essenes and who Jesus really was. But even then, he could only go so far. So I want to go back to Moses and the complete crap story that we've been sold. I want to talk about the Hebrew language, and I want to talk about the golden calf. Can you give us the history on where they got the gold to melt into a calf, and also what that means for people who take the Hebrew language seriously, which I was one of those people.
Well, there is no way they could have mined the gold on the way to the Exodus. They took it. Moses was a pharaoh, and he had stored gold for his tomb, and this was taken. He wanted to establish monotheism because he felt that various priest castes were like conflicts which kept the empire fighting and in discord. And he felt that there were problems that were brewing on the horizon, and that any time that nationalism becomes a concern, then monotheism becomes a good anchor for it, since one God, one nation sort of thing. When you go into the nationalist stage of any civilization, whether it's monument builder or colonial even, there is a tendency for leadership to try to erect a national religion. This is what Akhenaten wanted to do too, so I think that he felt like that he would take these people and he would create something and then come back. But, of course, that didn't work out. The golden calf represents a throwback to polytheism, which, of course, he denounced immediately. They had to practice warfare to survive, and they had to find and establish a place that was amenable to agriculture and making a means, so they did it by conquest. And there are many things that are rather mundane compared to what the myths are, like, for instance, what the Ark of the Holy Covenant is.
Yes, I want to talk about that because I wrote about this fellow that I saw in a documentary called Professor Tudor Parfit and the Lost Tribe. I want to talk about that, but we'll probably get to that after the break. But what does this mean for people who place significant value in the Hebrew language? Where did that come from?
Well, the Hebrew language, if you look at it very closely, has more origins, more different directions of origins coming to it. It is actually developed by scholars, and there's a lot of begging and borrowing in it. It is interesting, unique in many ways.
Well, let me ask the question a different way. Was it pieced together to support the official narrative?
Yes. If you look at many of the teachings of the Middle East, if you look at the Kabbalah, you look at many of the aspects, many of the legends, whether they go back to Sumer or whether they are Abyssinian or whatever, you see the influences all across the board. In fact, the first people that actually were able to piece together much of the truth about historical truth were the Knights Templars. They were trying to make peace with the Saracens, who were very warfaring and that pilgrims had to deal with when they were making Christian pilgrimage to the Holy Land. And the Templars were put in place to make it safe for these pilgrims to make pilgrimage to the Holy Land. So the Templars decided that, they couldn't make it peaceful for the pilgrims if they didn't make peace with the Saracens. So at the time that the Templars were being persecuted by the Vatican and the King of France, Suleiman was a very close friend of the Templars. And it's Suleiman that after the fall of Constantinople, which was the second Rome, the Ark of the Holy Covenant was there, and the Templars retrieved it, salvaged it. And whenever they came under persecution, they turned it over to Suleiman, and Suleiman took it to Ethiopia. Because the Templars were becoming Gnostic. And
yes,
this was
we can't have
the Gnostic church, the Gnostic Christian church. The only one that hadn't been destroyed was in Ethiopia. That's where the Ark ended up.
I want to continue, but before we do that, I want to reiterate that in no way are we trying to destroy people's faith in, if you want to call it God or whatever. I personally love the Ten Commandments, and I think I would love Christians a lot more if they actually followed it. And that's the thing. I mean, do we care where they came from? The important thing is, can they straighten us out if we'll actually pay attention to them? And I think that's where people get lost, is fighting over, well, my God said and your God said. Meanwhile, your planet is burning to the ground, and in your own religious text, it very specifically says you're the stewards of the earth, not God, you. That was handed to you. And I'm really sick and tired of arguing with people who, you're trying to raise awareness of Fukushima and GMOs and weather modification. And I got this idiot on Facebook the other day who said, oh, God is laughing at you arrogant people. And I said, oh, is that right? That's because that's what all good parents do. Laugh and laugh while their children are self-destructing and killing their planet, while the other half of his children won't do a damn thing to stop it. And you think you're going to be rewarded for it, and you think I'm arrogant? People really need to get with the program here. So we've talked a lot about some of the meddling in historical artifacts that have carried over into religious artifacts, which is all by design. And while we'll come back to the method behind the madness behind that later, I want to talk about some of the other anomalies that people don't know about, because it doesn't just affect religion, it affects everything. So there's the Baghdad battery, which is very, very old and ran off of the acid of grapes, I think it was. And I've said many times before that the farther back you go, the more advanced people were, not the other way around, not what we've been told. You also have, and this is another thing that is really important for me to communicate, especially in light of Fukushima, because during that show we did, the last show we did, which was episode number 7, I was talking about how there were still people dying from what we did with radiation before Fukushima. But it even goes back farther than that. And if I remember right, it's Mohenjo-Daro, where there's evidence of a previous nuclear exchange of nuclear weapons. Can you comment on that, James?
Well, there have been lineages that were more advanced than you are. Not all of them had to split the atom, but that was ill-advised, and you're paying the price for it now. The depleted uranium that has been used so liberally in the Middle East and elsewhere is mounting up. Tons and tons and tons of it have infected the planet and infected lungs and soldiers and civilians alike. Iraq is depleted uranium wasteland.
Yeah, that's god-awful. I mean, that's really disgusting. But the point I wanted to make about Mohenjo-Daro, which is another anomaly that people don't know about, where this area has experienced heat intensity so high that the sand was fused together like glass, and it's still radioactive. So we're not just dealing with the stupidity of our own lineage. We are also still saddled with the damage that has been done to this planet from other lineages to a degree, which is not a good situation. But there are many, many other anomalies that people don't know about. There's, I always pronounce this wrong, but I think it's called Antitheca Thera. And then there was also the Dark Knight satellite that Kevin Smith talked about, which goes in the opposite direction of all of our other satellites, and nobody really knows where it came from. And I would like for you to comment on that if you can, but I would like for people to keep in mind that so many of the anomalies we're talking about are the answer to what happened before, just like James was saying with the Etruscans. These people were tasked with carrying on information to the next lineage, and you've never seen it. The Vatican is hoarding it. And if we want to quote the King Hypocrite Obama, well, the only people that are going to lie are people that have something to hide, right? So why are they hiding it? What's going on? So can you talk about the Dark Knight satellite a little bit?
Well, there are two of them, and they go in different directions, which is anomalous enough. But they've never really tried to capture one. But these have been up there for quite some time.
Can you qualify that, James, when you say quite some time? What are we talking about?
38,000 years.
Okay.
Now, they are not a hall of records, but they're a little bit more than that. What they are basically is that they are a key to accessing Phobos, which is the supreme hall of records. It is a library of your entire history as a people, from where you came from, your technology, all your history. It's in Phobos. Phobos is a man-made moon. It's been acknowledged to be that by people as early as the 60s. Walter Sullivan, who was science editor for the New York Times, wrote a book, We Are Not Alone, in which he mentions that it is hollow, made of metal, rings like a bell when it's hit by anything, hence artificial. And if you look at it, it doesn't have, where it's hit by anything, doesn't have craters like the moon. And it has an iridium sheen to it. It was to be the landing site for a manned expedition to the moon that was projected back before 85. And the space effort came to naught because they did have bases, the Soviet Union and the United States working together did have bases on Mars and on the moon, But they began weaponizing them, and E.T. created a little problem for them that got them to leave and told them don't come back. So China may be encouraged to try because I think they probably established some kind of relationship with E.T. and might have the understanding that they're not to weaponize space, not to weaponize any of their bases, and to be respectful of the people already there. That may be true, and if China succeeds, it'll succeed on the basis of that. Otherwise, they'll be treated the same way. I noticed that somebody has raised a question about why I ignore hostile ETs. Well, there are no hostile ETs, and what people mistake for hostile ETs are the way that EBs, which are not ETs, they're not sentient life, are utilized and opportunized by military black ops on this planet, because it's important for them to sell a hostile alien thesis as their last and final step in implementing the New World Order. This has been discussed and mentioned even as early on by Dr. Werner von Braun and is mentioned by Carol Rosin. And it's also in the report from Iron Mountain, and it's in the report from some of the articles. And you had a President, Ronald Reagan, who said how wonderful it would be if we had an enemy from outer space that would unite us all. Anybody that has star travel can get rid of you and this planet in a heartbeat. So how wonderful is that? So the powers that be have bent over backwards to keep us from being able to acknowledge or know anything about ET presence on Earth and in our neighborhood. So all of a sudden, they want to churn this hostile alien thesis. So they've got to use the alternative media itself now, because they have done all these bad things, even taken people's lives, to keep the presence of ET under wraps. Even the truth about people that are here that are not us, but are similar to us, like the blondes, to keep all this hush-hush and whatever. And now all of a sudden, when they need this hostile ET threat, so that, you'll get everybody to bite all these bullets. I mean, look how many bullets we've had to bite for the powers that be so far. The destruction of economy, the destruction of standard of living, everything, because they weren't happy with what they had and wanted more. And now they want to completely take over the entire world and do what they will with it, which we've seen indications of what that means with Fukushima, Gulf of Mexico, and everything else that we're being visited upon. So now, how do they go about selling the presence of ET as an enemy? Why? They use the alternative media, and it's woo-woo, don't they?
That's very true. Can you guys hear me okay now?
Perfect.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So what I was trying to say before in response to that question is we have not avoided the hostile ET issue. In fact, we have tried relentlessly to show people that it's a lie. And people intimately familiar with our work will know that. This is episode 8. Episode 6 was all about that. And before we did that, there was a very lengthy article I wrote called Cosmology, What We Were Never Told and Why. It's on my blog at drowningin absurdity.wordpress.com on the Cosmology tab. It's on your website as well, which is emvsinfo.blogspot.com. And we also did a couple of years ago now, it's on YouTube, it's called A Refined Cosmology to Address Anomaly, or something similar to that. You'll find it. We have addressed this relentlessly, and so now you can see that I wasn't just being facetious when I said that we are the black sheep of the alternative media, which is why we did the show that we did in episode 6 with people who have taken the deal. This is what I was talking about with what's his face, Conan O'Brien, who is also showing you the mainstream media, they're all repeating the same thing. It's being pushed down by a single source. They've done the same thing and are trying to continue doing the same thing to alternative media, and that's the deal. And the deal is you have to include the hostile ET thesis in your work, and then you'll get promoted. Why do you think James and I, see, this is the thing. People think, well, you're not on the big shows, so you must not have anything important to say. That's how it works. That's why we're the black sheep. We haven't taken the deal, and we're not going to take the deal because we can't survive the deal, and we know that. So I'm really kind of offended at the question, in case you can't tell, because I think we put an awful lot of work into the whole thing. And in the last show we did about this, we went through their own documents and regurgitated what they said. They said they're going to do this to you, and yet people still don't get that they're doing exactly what they said. And I said years ago in interviews, the bad guys always tell you what they're going to do, and they do, and people don't listen. So this isn't hearsay. We're not making it up. We're regurgitating their own think tank studies. This is their plan, and they're doing exactly what they said they were going to do. And what we're trying to tell you is that they're going to do that, and if they do that, we can't survive it.
Let me add this. I've said this before, but there are people that may be listening to us for the first time, so I'd like to explain something. Technology is not a sign of high culture. It's overgrowing your technology, not letting it take control of you to where you're doing things that are so costly, so detrimental to the planet and to the people on it for agendas that are ultimately destructive, ultimately even life-threatening to most of the people, and eventually life-threatening to everyone. That's what we're facing today. So when you reach a certain technology, if you get past star travel, because like I've said before many times, if you have star travel, one individual can hold in their hand the means to destroy an entire planet. So you cannot tolerate aberrancy, either collectively or individually. So you have to grow out of this obsession. Oh, I got to create a hydrogen bomb. If I don't, somebody else will. You got to get out of this madness. You got to get out of this stupidity. You got to get out of this counterproduction. Then you become actually civilized. There are people that have less technology than we have that have grown to become members of the extended community. It is only plausible that as ETs develop and get star travel technology and the ability to do things with their stars that you can't imagine today, that they would form alliances, that they would have concrete understandings with others, that they would work together, and also that at some point or another, as their ambitions to improve the conditions of their system and overcome threats that are seasonal or repeated astrologically, then they would work together with the machines that are actually responsible for everything that we enjoy as being able to have planets that can sustain complex life. These are EMVs, and I've talked about them many times. They are seen in the sun. They form the energy of every star that has planets that support complex life, and eventually may have sentient life on them.
And I do want to try to qualify your statement, if I can, James, because we have talked so much about intelligent design, which is the real knowledge, really the bulk of the real knowledge that's being hidden from people, because if they understood how all of this worked, they couldn't be snowed anymore. So let me give an example. So we have a planet spinning, 16,000 miles an hour, but we're not all flying off of it. And how is that happening? So when James talks about how we don't have the metal, it's a built-in safety mechanism that would allow us to to travel in a craft that works off the same principles of our planet. That's what he's saying. When I say that intelligent design is the technology, that's what I'm saying. I'm saying exactly what he's saying. So you can't have aberrant people out there in the universe, like the people that we have here running this planet, that think they're going to be able to go out there and leave the rest of us behind to die in the mess they've made. It's not going to happen. It doesn't work like that. We are not going to get into that community until we have demonstrated that we deserve to be there, that we belong there. And this is, I don't know why people have such a hard time with this. I've seen people on James's blog. Well, if E.T. really cared, they would save us. Is that right? We don't even do that with our own children. If our own children mess up constantly and we continually bail them out, they don't learn anything. We don't even treat our own children that way. And so it's really true. James isn't asking anything of you that you would not ask of your own children. And this is where people get hung up. Well, they should save us. Why can't you save yourself? Jesus is going to come and save you, really? Because you can't do it? You absolutely can, but that's your escape clause, right? The New Age thing, the New Age movement has the same thing. Well, you're going to ascend out of here. No, you aren't. No, there's no reasonable creator that's going to reward you for looking the other way. We don't do that ourselves with our own children. I don't know why people can't get that. So I'm really kind of bent out of shape about that question, because we have tried so hard to address this. And at the same time, though, I have to go back to what I said in the beginning about learn, unlearn, and relearn, because I have had to go through this myself, which is one of the main reasons the first book I wrote, I took off the market. Like I said, I'm not writing to be a Pulitzer Prize winner, and I'm not so arrogant and egotistical that I'm going to defend what I wrote. It was wrong. Some of what I wrote was wrong, and I can't in good conscience keep selling it. Know that, because all I want is the truth, because we can't survive without it. And one of the things that I could not reconcile, this was one of the holes in the Swiss cheese of our reality that James filled for me and is trying to do for you in a very reasonable and common sense way. What I could not reconcile was the hostile ET thesis with our reality. Because we have rock paintings going back 10,000 years that show aliens on the rocks. We have paintings that show aliens in the sky from the 15th century. We have never been invaded. So how do you reconcile those two things? How do you reconcile the propaganda coming out of the elitists running our planet with the hostile ET crap with reality? You've never seen it, and we have tried to explain. You really think that these people would wait to take over our planet until we had technology that actually might be able to take them out? And I use the word might very loosely. On top of the fact that it's so contaminated, if we even had, suppose that we got to a place where we could host people from the extended community and say, okay, we need your help and we want it. You know, let's hook up and get together. Do you realize I've ran this scenario so many times, and we couldn't even provide them with a dinner, like a meal, a really good feast, because our food is contaminated, for God's sake. I wouldn't serve it to them because I don't want to eat it myself. And people think hostile ETs are our problem? There's no evidence for it. None.
Well, there's no common sense explanation for it either.
That's exactly right. Go ahead, Mhairead.
I was just going to say the other thing you didn't mention was how much people buy into the dimensional reptilian shape-shifting story, which is where I come in the sense that I was targeted by a group on a social networking site, and that was their main storyline, that they were rogue reptilians, and the only other place that I'd come across that was through, I think, Project Camelot, you know, and other groups that have really, really pushed for a long, long time this story that we have shape-shifting reptilians that tap in somehow to the bloodlines that are controlling the planet. So their story was that that was the case, but they were rogues. They had gone against this and they were on our side. So there was this whole kind of convoluted narrative that they were feeding me with, and many other people, which wasn't so much on board straight away. That was a gradual, subtle process that they introduced me to, because it wasn't something I would have been ready to believe straight away. But like you were pointing out earlier on, how much the alternative media comes down from the same source. So they're all buying into that and pushing that agenda, for want of a better word. So if you, like me, and you're going to look for something, naturally you're going the alternative way, right? So you're looking into the UFO scene and you look into that a little bit and you get bombarded with that, plus a mixture of channeled messages from the Pleiadians and somebody telling you that they're walking from Sirius and all of this, what I now know to be absolute bunkum, to put it politely. And, I was subjected to that for a long period of time, and I had to deprogram myself. I had to come out of it. I've lost friends. I've, had to spend a great deal of time working it all out for myself. And one of the other things about this group that is what I wanted to bring up as well, and we've talked about this, Crystal, was that they gave me your first book as a workbook to work on. And anyone who's looked at your book will know it's not like just a book. It's a huge kind of like a research manual. There's a lot to it. And if you could work with other people, it would be fantastic to work through. So they sent me that and I was really excited, and they were saying, oh, you get on board with this and so on and so on. And then proceeded to teach against it. So, straight away there was this enormous confusion of, well, wait a minute, you're telling me what's in this book is really important to understand, how nature has basically, the codes of nature have been hacked, and weather manipulation, HAARP, all of that stuff, vaccines, everything that you addressed in there that needed to be looked into. And then push against that, because she was saying, the leader of this group was saying, oh, you don't have free will. And you were saying in the book, we all have free will. It's time for us to take responsibilities. So I don't know whether you want to comment on that, but I just wanted to kind of inject that into the discussion, because if people are starting to talk about the hostile ET thing, then they have to look at the whole stuff around the reptilian stuff, which has been around an awful long time.
Well, I suspect very seriously that most of these groups are funded. And it's very important to the monsters, to the powers that be, to use the alternative media to sell the hostile alien thesis. They can't, because of their denial of it for 100 years and what they've done to people that have tried to write about the experiences of people they know that have had contact with ET. ET made contact with world leaders. ET sat down with them. ET offered to get rid of the EBs for them. ET has told them that you don't need to be doing nuclear energy. You need to be looking at solar. You need to be looking at a number of other opportunities for energy, and we can help you if you will stop doing this. And they put in plain, simple language that any pursuit of nuclear, like we have today, will lead to total disaster. And it is leading to total disaster. There's no argument.
Yes, we've been through this over and over, and history may not be exact every time, but it certainly rhymes. And I appreciate you bringing that up, Mhairead, because this is actually how you and I met. I released my first book. It's not available anymore. I took it off the market once I realized I had things in it that were not correct. And that's the thing. People get angry about that. Well, you made a mistake. Yeah. I grew past it. That's why we're here, isn't it? To grow. If so, you're mad that I grew. Well, I'm not. I want the truth because we need to survive, and we can't do it without the truth.
Well, Crystal, they just don't see anybody else doing that. You've got a whole host of ufologists that'll come out with the book, and their thesis or some of their assertions will, in retrospect, be absurd, because as things develop, people will see that many of the things they play on is just not true, because they're not relevant to the present, to what's being discussed and discovered up to now. So what do? As they continue their work in ufology, they go out to interview witnesses of UFO events and sightings, contact, whatever. They don't ask them to tell their stories. They're only interested in them reiterating whatever it is that'll support what they put down in black and white. They're in a race to sell their next book. And it doesn't make any difference whether it's true or not, or whether they feel it's true or not. It's that they feel like some of these professors that have to protect their tenure And their dissertation has got to be sacrosanct, and they have to keep it spotless with whatever BS they can feed the public about it in their next work, or their lectures, or maybe a paper that they're doing for one of the periodicals. This is the way it works. You do not get anywhere as a truth seeker on this planet. You know, from conventional institutions, conventional science, conventional agency practices of the people that hire and fund these institutions. No way. If you're a truth seeker, you are going to put something on the face, and it's not very nice, of somebody who is beaten on their chest with funding money or whatever because they're saying what the powers that be want them to say. So what Oppenheimer came out, he was more single-handedly responsible for developing the atom bomb than anybody. And Oppenheimer came out and said, no, I won't help you develop the hydrogen bomb. It shouldn't be developed. This is where we should stop. And so what did they do? They went after him to vilify him on the basis of association of his brother. His brother had been a communist or had belonged to some socialist group in college or whatever. And so therefore we'll make it look like Oppenheimer was too. And of course they thought so much of him and that he was no security risk or whatever that he headed up the Manhattan Project. And yet now they turn around on him like that, and they bring in a hack by the name of Edward Teller, and he takes over, and his only recommendation is he'll say what they want him to say.
Well, that's the way it works in the alternative media, too. And so I want listeners to know that the first book I wrote, I took off the market a couple of years ago once I realized that just like you, I have been betrayed, and I'm not going to sell that because I want a future, and that requires the truth. I'm not going to do it. And once I took it off the market, there were maybe a couple of dozen used copies still on Amazon, and they disappeared instantly. And now there's one copy that somebody's trying to sell for thousands of dollars. And I keep telling people, don't buy it. It's outdated. I don't know who's trying to sell it. But I'm giving you what I've learned for free through these shows and through my blog. I'm not charging you for it. So don't worry about it. But but here's the history of what Mhairead was getting at. I released the book publicly in 2009. The copyright date is 2008. I held it back for a while to make sure, because that's what happens when you write a book and you're growing really fast. You can outgrow what you wrote yesterday. So I let it sit for a while. So that I wasn't.
Well, you can, Crystal, but not the hacks.
Yeah, but here's what happened. So I released it. So in 2010, I got an email from a woman who said, there's this group out there who's giving people your book and teaching it to them, and I'm sure you know who they are. And I emailed her back and I said, I don't have any idea who they are, and she wouldn't tell me who they were. So she's not going to tell me. I'm not, what can I do about that? It wasn't until Mhairead came forward and told me who was using it. It's cult bait. They were using it for cult bait. And this is really disgusting, and I want to explain what I mean by this. Yes, I got things wrong. That's okay. I'm okay with learn, unlearn, and relearn. I get it. That's why I'm here. That's why we're all here. That doesn't bother me. What bothered me, though, was when Mhairead began to explain to me who was using it and how they were using it, and they were using it as cult bait. And I say that because even now, and I'm going to be very polite this evening, and I'm not going to name names because it isn't really necessary. But if people look at the world around them, especially the alternative media, with really open eyes, they're going to find that the woo-woo New Age community is being outed for the garbage that it is. But these people are making an awful lot of money, and they don't want to give it up. And they know that they're going to become irrelevant if they don't start digging into what's really going on this planet, the real problems that we have. So you'll find New Age people, who talked about ascending to a fifth dimension and all this crap forever and wouldn't touch any of the important issues on our planet. Well, they're good buddies with Dane Wigington, the chemtrail guy now. You see, This is what they do. And religion, the New Age community, all of it, it's the same pattern over and over and over. They know that you're not stupid. They know you've been dumbed down and they capitalize on it, but they know that you're not a complete moron. And they know that you know some of the things that are going on. And they know that that's the way to pull you in. But after you're in, that's when it gets weird. That's when it gets really weird. And that's how it works. That's what they do. So the Bible is the same way. A lot of religious doctrine is. It has pearls of wisdom in it. They all do. And I've quoted some of it myself because you can't bring people into a cult on complete bullshit. There has to be something in it that is truthful, that is the hook that gets them there. And until you actually explained to me, Mhairead, who these people were and what they were doing, I had no idea because the other person wouldn't tell me. And that's exactly what they did. They used it for cult bait. And they said, oh, yeah, look, she talks about all these important things. But then when it really got down to it.
Yeah, they wouldn't work with it. I mean, I had was given this idea that other people in this social networking site were given the book as well. And we were somehow working together and sharing, because there's a lot to it. There's a lot of reading involved. There's a lot of deep work and research in the book, but you obviously have got to do the work yourself. So I was given that impression, but that's not what happened. Instead, it was just like this fun and games. There was a lot of manipulation and there was abuse. There was women who were targeted. The majority of them were single women. And a lot of them were pushed to believe in ascension. That was another part of it. It's important to point out the time period here as well, because it would be around 2010, so not long after your book came out, and the Gulf oil spill happened, which I thought was completely horrific. And they kind of talked about that, but also glossed over it and said, oh, the planet's dying, but, come 2012, we'll all ascend, all the good people, inverted commas. And
yeah.
And the idea that you're a walk-in, so that makes you more special, so your ego is fed. I'm talking about this because I'm hoping it will help other people. I'm not happy about it. I feel embarrassed about it because I was duped. I was lied to. But I have to stress that it's a level of betrayal, but it's also abusive. It's abusive to be continually lied to and manipulated and mind controlled because there was a level of that to it, particularly the way I was dealt with because I had closer dealings with the group leader. And she claimed to be gushing unconditional love all over me, but she was doing nothing of the kind. And she knew how vulnerable I was. She knew how vulnerable I was in my personal life. And she used that against me. So that's what these people do. And I find it hard to believe that that isn't going on in many parts of the alternative media, in many parts of the UFO community, and so on and so forth. So they also claim to be working with abductees, which I think is another thing that's important to point out. I don't know whether they were or not. When you pull out something like this, it's very hard to know what was true, what wasn't true. I hung on to the fact that you had contacted me and they told me, I was thrilled because you wrote something on my blog. I can't remember how it happened. And I thought this is really great. I mentioned to them, I said, oh, Crystal Clark got in touch with me. How cool is that? And they were like, oh, well, don't tell her where you got the book from. Don't tell her anything about us because the bad guys will get us, we'll get caught and all this rubbish. And of course I took that very seriously because I wanted to protect them because I was so deeply entrenched by that time and involved. So when I got dumped by them because I got tired of being abused by one in particular, verbal abuse and emails and that kind of thing because I wouldn't toe the line. And that's just kind of a generalization because it would take forever to go into it in great detail. But I just thought, well, I sort of pulled out of it and had a process whereby I looked at a lot of other people in the alternative community and thought, well, maybe they've got the right idea. Maybe it's this, maybe it's that. And in the end, I just was spinning out and I thought I have to walk away from all of it, which I did. But I never let go of your material. And that's when I approached you and told you the story, and that was probably just after 2012. I think a part of me was waiting for us to get over that hump. Because it felt to me like there was just such pressure on everyone at that time. There was so much stuff going around, information overload for everybody. And I thought, I'll wait. And I think I contacted you just after that. But they were part of that build-up. Yeah, I think it's really important for people to start to understand how much effort is going into the lie. You know, there's a lot of money being spent, and it's very, very deliberate. It's information control, it's disinformation, manipulation, mind control. They don't want you to find out what you really need to know about the truth and about yourself, about who you are and your role on this planet. Because a lot of people who are attracted to this tend to be women like myself, tend to be people who are interested, are compassionate, have a good heart, you know, and it's a sad thing to see it happen and continue to happen. It's 2014 now. We're really in trouble. We need you on board, you know?
We're in very big trouble, Mhairead, and I really appreciate you sharing that experience, because this is another thing that we need to out for what it is, and this is all of the bogus sacred feminine crap. Most of this is coming from men that don't give a shit about women or the sacred feminine, or they would step up and say, oh, look, the mother of all of us is being destroyed and we should stop it. But they don't do that. And the first awakening I had with that was someone who's really big into this sacred feminine crap. And I'm an empath. I'm not going to deny it. I am, and I'm good at it. And I got some really creepy feelings from this person. I mean, like sexually deviant creepy feelings. And I thought, okay, you know what? I don't always get it right. Let me dig into this person and see. I go to their website, and sure enough, there's a picture of Mary Magdalene on their homepage, spread eagle and naked. Now, can you imagine if you and I, if tables were reversed and it was a matriarchal society out of control and we were trying to con the men by saying, oh, yes, we totally understand the sacred masculine. And then when they went to our Facebook page or our website, they saw Jesus spread eagle and naked. It's disgusting. Women have been, look, I don't care about race. I don't care if you're black, white, red, yellow, blue. I don't care. Because the fact of the matter is that women of all colors and creeds have been the most denigrated and repressed people on this planet for so long. And I don't know why people can't get the connection to that and the destruction of the earth, because there is a definite correlation. And any of these idiots pushing the sacred feminine that are not going to talk about Fukushima and GMOs and vaccines don't get it. And it disgusts me that they prey on women who know they've been abused relentlessly and are tired of it. And all they want is for someone to say, I care about you. I care about your feminine side. I know it's important and it matters and I want to include it. And that's the hook they're using to get people into these cults. And it's disgusting because there's no valid base for it. They're preying on more victims. And I'm really sick of it. And I think it needs to be called out because this is the same crap, well, it's Eve's fault. She ate the apple. That's bullshit. That whole story is bullshit. And I'm sick of it. You know what I'm saying? Oh, the women are the cause of all of our problems, really. And you know what? You want to hear something funny? My son was asking me about this last night. He says, well, do you know who the next president is going to be? And I said, yeah, it's going to be Hillary Clinton, because that's who they're pushing, and that's the way it works. They're not elected, they're selected, and then they cram it down your throat through media. And I told him it's disgusting because he said, I knew it because first they went to a black president and now they're going to go to a female. And I said, yeah, that's right. And I said, and what's so sad about it is females will support her just because she's a female. And she's a bigger monster than Obama is. It's disgusting.
Just the fact of being empathic and naturally, we're the nurturers. We're the ones that step forward to nurture. It's in our nature, whether you've got children or not. I'm not a mother. I don't have children, but, I care about people. And the way that they manipulate that against you, they use it, they turn it against you somehow or other. They do it in such a way that, you become ineffective and you feel powerless. You feel that you're not being empowered. And women don't empower each other the way that they could because they're too busy competing with each other. You see what I mean? This is the whole thing about, I'm more beautiful than you are, I'm this, I'm that, I'm the next thing. And that is another crock of absolute bullshit because we should be standing firm and standing together, not competing with each other, not undermining each other, not bitching and complaining because
that's right.
We're in a crisis point,
I'm very impressed with the women that have taken leadership roles, like Crystal and like you, Mhairead. Then step forward and you're clearing your heads. You're on a direct path to the truth. You're doing so much more. And the fact of the matter is, it wasn't easy. It wasn't an easy thing to come to the realizations that you had. You had to dump a comfort zone to do it.
Yeah.
And thank God you did. And, you know, every thinking woman out there needs to stop and realize how, as a woman, they have been opportunized, not just by men, but by other women, like you just pointed out. And we all need to pull together, men and women both, of all ethnic backgrounds, whatever you want to call differences in the color of our skin, which I guess is race. Race has no meaning to me. It shouldn't to anybody. And it's a sad thing to see that there are groups of people today that have been down, have been the underdog that cling to racism as much as white people ever did. You have to give up what keeps you from being able to recognize your brother and your sister. Because we are brothers and sisters, not just under the skin, but committed to the same goals, and that's freeing ourselves from what has become a tyranny of greed, a tyranny of subversion of the truth in every respect that's important, and take the destiny of our lives in our hands together and work towards goals that are commensurate with the fate of everybody alike. Not something that is just good for this agenda, just good for these people, just good, but for everybody, because this planet, if it's healthy, can provide for everyone.
Yes, the betrayal has to end. You can't maintain a family in the midst of betrayal. At your local, you know, within your own home, within your own clubs, within your own planet, you can't do it. And we have to get past the betrayal. And there is no sacred feminine without the sacred masculine. The sacred, you know, it's like, you know, like you were saying earlier, James, technology isn't the ultimate decider of how advanced you are. I think morality is. At what point did we lose that? You know, religion tossed it out the door. The New Age community tossed it out the door. There's no morality left. And people say, well, morality is subjective. No, it's not. The truth isn't subjective. And this is the crap that people are fed through religion and through the New Age community. Well, it's subjective. Well, you've got your truth. There's one truth. And if we can't find it, we're in trouble. And that's the whole point, right? Because you see these people laugh and laugh, you know, they go say, oh, the Iranians are killing you. And they go tell the Iranians the Americans are going to kill you. And they laugh while we kill each other. And they laugh all the way to the bank because they supplied the weapons to do it. These people are cowards in and of themselves. They don't get their hands dirty. They pay someone else to do it. Well, who's the someone else? It's one of us. Stop doing it. Stop helping them kill your brothers and sisters. You know, it's like the police. In some countries, the police finally got it and started siding with the protesters because they're in the same damn boat, you know?
We have a situation today where probably 99.9% of everyone on this planet, whether they acknowledge it or not, are in the same boat with us. They may not realize it, but if they'll make the effort to investigate on their own, they'll see that they're in the same boat we're in. They should have the same concerns we have. They might not agree with every point we make or even most of the points that we make, but the point is that we're on a path to trying to do something about some of the things all of us should be upset about. When is the last time that we saw over important issues justice done? That's the one thing I crave the most to see. It's the one thing that I cry out to see. And I'm sure that most people feel the same way I do.
You know, that is so true, James. And I had we've already went, well, actually it's time to wrap it up. And Dave said we could go over. I have a whole list of other stuff to talk about, but I don't want to go over tonight because it's my anniversary and I would actually like to spend it with the man I love, what's left of it. But that is actually the note that I wanted to end this on, is justice, because The word justice doesn't mean anything anymore. The word justice has been converted into just us. And you and I aren't part of that club. And what people don't get is there can be no justice without the truth. And that's what sickens me about people that say, well, we're just going to get raptured out of here. We don't care. So really? So justice doesn't mean anything to you? And all the aliens are doing it? No, they aren't. The people killing this planet have names and addresses on this planet. And if you want justice, you have to take them to task. And in order to do that, people need to know the truth. They have to have it. So for tonight, there's only one more thing that I would actually like to leave listeners with. I would like to leave listeners with the following question, food for thought. What if we didn't have names? You know, like Crystal or James or Mhairead or Dave. What if we didn't have names, but were referred to by what we stand for? And that is ultimately what goes on our tombstones. And when I say what we stand for, I mean that in both senses of the word. Not just what we stood up for, but what we tolerate. What if that was what you were known by? What would you change? And if that was what we were known by, it wouldn't even take 2 words for half of the people on this planet to put that on their tombstone. It would take 1 symbol, and it would be an S with 2 lines through it. And that is the path to self-destruction. We can't survive that. So think about it. What do you stand for? And remember that if you don't stand for anything, you'll fall for anything. So that's all I have to say for tonight. I had a whole lot more, but like I said, it's my anniversary, so I'm ready to wrap it up if you guys don't mind.
Well, tell that lucky guy hello for me, too.
I will. He's awesome. Yeah, he's awesome.
And me too, if you don't mind.
You got it. He's a wonderful, beautiful human being. He and my son both are. Do I get to brag for a minute about my son taking? Did I already do that? He won the state
No, you
championship.
didn't do it. You didn't do it enough.
I'm just so, it's an awful tightrope to have to walk as a parent between, trying to educate your child about what's really going on and trying to encourage them to live a normal life. It's very difficult. And it's things like that that let me know I've done a good job. And so that's all right. I like it. You can't ask for more than that.
He's a bowling champion, folks.
He won the state championship 2 days ago, and he's only been bowling for a year. And I missed the damn thing because I was on a conference call trying to work out how to make this a good show for you guys. So,
well, I didn't know.
I know you guys didn't know, but, that's the thing. Like, my anniversary is today, but my husband and I really celebrated it yesterday because I had to do a show tonight. And that's the thing, we don't charge for what we do. How can we really in good conscience? But it's not just about the money, I miss out, there are not a lot of people in this industry who have a long-term marriage and a family to raise. And it's very difficult. I don't just, it's not just how I can't empower my family financially. I miss an awful lot of stuff to do what I do for my larger family, which is Team Earth. And I'm very lucky that my immediate family gives me the grace and the patience to do that. Without them, I couldn't do it. So they need some gratitude too. They're good people. So I don't have anything else to add for this evening. Do either of you? Do you, Mhairead?
No, it just seems to have flown by, and there's so much more that we probably could have talked about. Maybe, I hate to say maybe that's another show, I don't know. I'd be interested to know, I'd like to hear people's feedback. I think we've opened up some channels for discussion there. I'm hoping that maybe people will come to the blog, either James's blog or Crystal's blog, and ask questions and engage with this, Don't just let it go by. Challenge us with it. Talk about it.
They're certainly welcome to, Mhairead.
It's not, I think maybe that's why I was so offended earlier. How are you ignoring that? believe me, I'm ignoring my family to give you that information, and then you accuse us of ignoring the information. My God, I don't know how to process that. I really don't. You know, it's an awful thing to live in a house with two people you love more than life itself and still be homesick, because your greater family means more. You know, it's a tough thing. You know, it's a tough thing. We do the best we can. And I also want to say how much James and I appreciate you being here with us, Mhairead. And we're looking forward to having you here with us in the future, because you know, you're very, very intelligent. You have your own stories to tell. And I think that's important, because we need to know that we're not alone. I'm not perfect. You're not perfect. None of us are perfect, but we care enough to keep trying to get there. And that's really what matters, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So that's it for me anyway. And do you have anything you wanted to add, James, or are you good?
No, it's a good place to end. I really appreciate you two, and I think that the show has been kept on a very good path because of you two. I tend to meander a little bit. Yeah, Mhairead, I know.
I feel like quoting Yoda sometimes. Backwards talking I am, because, you know, there's so much to say, and there's so many different ways you can say it, and it's just all swirling around in your head at the same time, and you're just thinking, can I pull out the best example for today that people will get it? Sometimes it comes out the way it's supposed to, and sometimes it doesn't, and that's the thing. You know, we're just people like all of you listening. We're just like you, and this is the crap that the cults try to pull you in with. Well, you're special. No, you aren't. None of you are special, because we're all special. There's no distinction to be made. And we really have to get that. We are in this together. We are brothers and sisters riding on a train that's about to go off the edge. And if we can't figure that out and work together, it's going off the edge. Yep. I don't want to see it happen, and I know that most of you don't either. So, you know, together we can get there, and that's important.
For sure, yeah.
All right, well, thank you again, Dave, for a wonderful evening. I really appreciate being on your network. You know, you're just a wonderful host.
No, I'm not the host. You're the host. I'm just a producer. Let's get that straight, dadgummit.
Well, you're a damn good producer. How's that?
Thank you. I appreciate that. I do the best I can with what I have, and with hosts like you three, wow, piece of cake.
Oh, you're awesome. Thanks, Dave. Go enjoy your Valentine's Day.
I am going to go enjoy the rest of my supper as soon as it heats up.
Yes, very good. All right. All right, well, it's always an honor and a pleasure to work with kindred spirits, so good night, you guys.
Good night.
We're off the air.
Welcome to Wolf Spirit Radio.